The temperature, ice forming along the edges of the chamber, the air thickening with the oppressive weight of its presence. Focus fire on its core, Eric's ordered, desperation creeping into his voice. The squad obeyed, unleashing everything they had. Talon set off explosives strategically placed along the walls, causing controlled detonations designed to disorient the warden. Varn fired round after round from his pulse cannon, while Rex deployed an array of energy disruptors, hoping to interfere with the warden's ability to control its form. But the warden simply absorbed the chaos around it, its body contorting, deflecting every attack with ease. Nothing's working, Varn growled, frustration mounting as his cannon's blast seemed to vanish into thin air. The warden's eyes turned toward Rex. It was as if it could see through him, understand his every move before he even made it. The air around Rex warped, and with a flick of the warden's ethereal hand, a surge of energy rocketed toward the hacker. Rex barely had time to react before the energy crashed into him, sending him flying across the room and slamming into the wall. Rex, Talon shouted, rushing to his side, but there was no time for pity. The warden was still moving, shifting toward them, its body pulsating with energy, its form seeming to expand and contract with each breath. Eric's mind raced. They needed a new strategy, but it was hard to think clearly with the chaos swirling around them. The warden wasn't just a defense mechanism. It was an entity of unimaginable power, forged in the deepest layers of Earth's history. It was Earth itself standing against them. Rex, you need to interface with the Vault's core. Eric's barked. Override the defenses. We need control. Rex, battered but determined, pushed himself up, his hands trembling from the shock. It's not that simple, he gasped, struggling to stay conscious. The warden's consciousness is fused with the entire vault. If I try to override it, you'll be destroyed, Eric's finished, his mind clicking into place. But we have no choice. The weight of that decision hit him, but the reality was clear. The Xerex had to risk everything or perish. If the warden was not stopped, it would continue to defend Earth with an unrelenting ferocity. But the warden's power wasn't limitless. It had a source. The vault, the core, and its mechanisms. If they could sever the warden's connection to the vault, they might stand a chance. Everyone to the core, Eric's ordered, and without another word, the team pushed forward. The walls of the vault bent and twisted in strange patterns, trying to slow them down, but they moved as one, fast, focused, unrelenting. They reached the heart of the vault, the core, pulsing with strange light and energy. The warden followed them, its form looming in the doorway, blocking their path. Eric's, it's coming, Talon shouted, raising his weapon. But the warden's energy field crackled and the air thickened, preventing any further movement. We fight through, Eric said, voice full of finality. His hands gripped his weapon as the warden's eyes locked onto him. The time for strategy had passed. Now, it was a battle for survival, and they would not back down. Not now. With a final roar, the warden lunged forward, its body shifting into a mass of crackling energy. The team unleashed everything they had left. Explosions, pulse shots, disruptors, everything. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. The war had only just begun. The vault's core pulsed with increasing intensity as Eric's and his team stood poised for their final confrontation with the warden. The energy around them felt suffocating, like the entire room was holding its breath. The warden, now fully manifested in all its formidable glory, towered above them, an incorporeal mass of shifting light and raw power. Its eyes, now glowing with an ancient fury, fixed upon Eric's with an unwavering, predatory focus. Move! Eric's barked, signaling his squad to take positions around the core. There was no room for hesitation. This was their last chance. Rex, still recovering from his earlier blast, staggered to his feet, clutching his arm. I'm not sure I can override it, he muttered, sweat dripping down his face. The vault was alive with the Warden's presence, its consciousness woven into every fiber of the facility's complex systems. Rex's interface device flickered erratically, as if it too was being crushed under the weight of the Warden's power. "We don't have a choice," Aerix replied, his voice low and determined. His gaze was fixed on the Warden. "You find a way, Rex. The alternative is death." The team fanned out, weapons raised, scanning the shifting form of the Warden. It moved like liquid, a mass of energy that defied the laws of physics, its every motion sending ripples through the air. But there was one thing Aerix knew. They could not defeat the Warden with brute force. No matter how much energy they threw at it, the Warden simply absorbed it, growing stronger and more relentless with each passing second. "We need to sever its link to the vault," Aerix continued, his mind working at full speed. "Rex, can you disconnect it?" Rex's eyes flicked over the vault's interface, desperation evident on his face. I can try, but I'll need time. The system's so integrated with the Warden's energy that it's like trying to cut a thread tied to a living being." Aerix nodded, already anticipating the difficulty. "We hold it off for as long as we can." With a flick of his wrist, Aerix activated his comm link. "Varn, Talon, you know what to do. Keep it busy." Without another word, Varn and Talon advanced, their weapons blazing. Pulse shots and disruptor blasts flew through the air, aimed at the Warden's shifting form. Each hit seemed to make the Warden recoil, but it was as if the energy merely fueled it further. It expanded, engulfing the entire room in a sickening, blinding light. Varn ducked as the Warden's energy field lashed out, the force of it throwing him against the vault's metallic wall. He scrambled to his feet, firing once more, but his shots did little more than dissipate against the Warden's ethereal shield. "It's getting stronger." Varn grunted, frustration rising. "We need to find its weakness." "There is no weakness," Aerix shouted back. "It's an elemental force. We're dealing with something beyond our comprehension." As the Warden shifted once more, its form expanding outward, the very air crackling with its presence, Rex frantically worked at the core's interface. The holographic screens in front of him pulsed, displaying complex systems in code that only he could decipher. His fingers flew across the interface, every keystroke a desperate attempt to breach the Warden's control over the vault. "I'm close, but I need more time," Rex called out, panic rising in his voice. Aerix didn't respond. His focus was entirely on the Warden, whose glowing eyes now narrowed, locking onto him. The Warden's form surged forward, its energy twisting into something more solid, more dangerous. It was preparing for something, perhaps a final, fatal blow. "Aerix," Talon shouted, his voice strained. "We can't keep this up for much longer." "I know," Aerix said grimly. "Just hold it off. We're almost there." The Warden reached for Aerix, its energy tendrils stretching toward him like claws. The air hummed with power as it seemed to reach into the very heart of his soul. But Aerix wasn't afraid. This was Earth's last line of defense. If they couldn't stop the Warden, Earth would fall, and the Xerx would have no home left to conquer. In one swift motion, Aerix dove toward the core, rolling beneath the Warden's grasping form. His heart pounded, but his focus remained unbroken. He had no time for doubt, no time for second-guessing. The vault's lights flickered as Rex worked desperately to bypass the Warden's network. It was a race against time, a race against the unstoppable force that was now bearing down on them. Aerix could feel the energy growing stronger, pushing him back, forcing him to fight against an invisible current. Suddenly, Rex's voice cut through the air, his tone full of urgency. "I've got it. I've isolated the Warden's connection to the vault." Aerix didn't waste a moment. "Do it now." With a final flourish, Rex triggered the override sequence. The vault's core thrummed, then flickered, and for a brief moment, the Warden's form trembled as if it were struggling against an unseen force. The walls around them cracked, energy surging through the room in violent pulses. "No!" The Warden's voice boomed, deep and terrifying. resonating like the cry of the earth itself. The vault shook violently, and the warden's form began to fragment, its energy splintering as a connection to the vault was severed. But the warden's power was not completely gone. It was only diminished, spread thin. Eric's wasted no time. He drew his weapon, a sleek, powerful pulse rifle, and aimed it at the warden's flickering form. He fired, sending a concentrated shot of energy directly into the warden's heart. The shot struck with an earth-shattering explosion, and for a moment, the warden's form faltered. But the battle was far from over. The warden screamed in fury, its voice reverberating through the walls, a terrible, guttural cry that filled the entire facility. Its energy began to solidify, reshaping into a colossal, towering figure, a final, desperate form that sought to crush everything in its path. Talon, Varn, and Rex all stood in formation, weapons raised, ready for the warden's last assault. Eric's heart thundered in his chest as he prepared to make the final strike. The warden was not just a creature. They were an embodiment of Earth's primal forces, an ancient protector summoned to defend the planet at all costs. But even the warden, as powerful as it was, had limits. The core had been severed. The warden could no longer draw on the vault's energy, and its form began to destabilize. With a final unyielding roar, Eric's fired once more. The shot struck true, and the warden's energy shattered, its form collapsing into a wave of raw power that spread across the room. The walls of the vault cracked and shattered as the warden, Earth's last offender, was finally torn asunder. For a moment, silence fell. The energy in the vault dissipated, leaving only the echoes of the warden's final cry. Eric stood, breathing heavily, his weapon still raised. The team was alive. They had won. But at what cost? Earth's last offender had been defeated, but at a price no Xerex had ever expected to pay. And in the quiet that followed, Eric's couldn't shake the feeling that this victory was only the beginning of something much larger, a war that had only just begun.
Ready? Yeah. Cool. Well, I'll see you a month, a week, who knows. I'll see you then.